You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozar. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday, the 2nd of July. Now we might have lessons in gay marriage in our schools. It is true, foreign workers take nearly half of Olympic Park jobs. Hate cleric's lawyer received £1 million in legal aid in a year. France, Spain and Italy forced Germany into a £600 billion bailout. Rogue Afghan policeman kills 3 British soldiers. EU has something to hide in Kosovo. Thought for the day, Britishness and what it actually means to you today. UK news. There could be lessons in gay marriages set out for our school children, it's been reported. Officials at the Home Office and the Department of Education think that it may be illegal not to teach children about same-sex marriage once it has been passed in law. Under the Education Act 1996, pupils must learn about the nature of marriage and its importance in sex education classes. Apparently last March, an unnamed official at the Government Equalities Office emailed a pal at the Department of Education asking whether the introduction of same-sex marriage will affect the school's responsibility to teach pupils about marriage. Tory MP David Burrows questioned if schools could exercise discretion on the subject. Colin Hart for the Coalition of Marriage commented that marriage appears over 3,000 times in law. It is simply impossible to redefine it without serious consequences, like having to teach children about same-sex marriage even though it would impinge on their parents' moral and religious views. Ministers are committed to introducing legislation on same-sex marriage before the next general election in 2015, despite strong objections from church leaders. A World at 8 reporter commented, "It will be interesting to see if this law is passed, how our Muslim population would accept their children being taught about same-sex marriage, as it clearly states in the Quran that any form of same-sex relationships is forbidden. It should be interesting." So World at 8 have been proved right yet again. It is official. Nearly half of the Olympic Park jobs have gone to foreign workers. These figures were compiled last December, so are hardly up to date, and World at 8 believes this figure can be easily increased to more than half. The Olympic Delivery Authority, the ODA, had pledged to employ local people, but the word local has a loophole and can, and obviously has, included people from Ireland, Lithuania, Poland and Bulgaria, who can have an address in the areas of Newnham, Greenwich, Tower Hamlets, Hackney and Waltham Forest. These are not exactly unenriched areas of our capital. Plus the fact that many new immigrants from the Third World come straight into those addresses and can secure employment at the park. The ODA is quoted as saying that recruitment decisions are ultimately taken by our contractors, 98% of whom are registered in the UK. A World at 8 writer has commented, "The ODA have answered their own question. If their own contractors are in these areas, it would seem obvious that they take all the foreign and immigrant workforce available because they will be deemed as local. Local in this case does not mean locally born. Once again, a handout to foreign workers who will probably find means of staying in this country when the Olympics have long gone. It is less a question now of being racist than being a survivalist in one's own country." The lawyers of hate cleric Abu Hamza, Mudassar Arani, has received almost double the legal aid that she received the previous year from public funds, totalling almost £1 million. In fact, £946,688. Arani and Co.'s enemies of England clients include Diren Barot, who planned to use cars for radioactive explosions, and Mukhtar Saeed Ibrahim and Yassine Omar, whose failed attacks in 2005 still killed 52 people. Arani runs this firm from rundown offices above a greengrocer in Southall, West London. A World at 8 reporter commented, "She is violently anti-British and pro-Muslim. Her obvious reason for operating in this country is that she is making money out of the legal aid system whilst blowing her own trumpet. A case for deporting her and her clients should be issued forthwith." Euronews. The combined machinations of France, Spain and Italy forced Angela Merkel into a U-turn on the night of the summit. She reluctantly signed off on a deal which will give Spain and Italy a €600 billion bailout from the Eurozone fund. She faces a backlash in Germany, where the opposition SPD called it a 180-degree turn. François Hollande, the new socialist president of France, backed up Mario Monti and Mariano Rajoy when they threatened to block a €100 billion growth fund unless Merkel played ball. It is unfortunate that poor little Greece did not have the same backers as these large European countries. This bailout, however large, might still prove to be just the sticking plaster on the European financial wound. World news. Rogue Afghan policeman kills 3 British soldiers. 3 soldiers of the NATO-led International Security Assistance Force, ISAF, who were shot dead by a man wearing an Afghan National Police uniform in southern Afghanistan on Sunday, were identified as Britons. These killings raised to 7 the number of British soldiers killed by their Afghan allies this year. Reports quoting Britain's Ministry of Defence said on Monday that 2 of the killed troopers served with the 1st Battalion Welsh Guards and the 3rd with the Royal Corps of Signals. ISAF said in a statement on Sunday that the gunman was injured and later taken into custody. It is investigating the incident. British commanders are now calling for a change in policy by adopting an American approach to security when working alongside Afghans. The EU has something to hide in Kosovo. Italian MEP Pino Arlacchi has said the European Union is failing in its task to combat major corruption cases in Kosovo. He goes on to say that the EU's civilian mission in Kosovo continues to refuse to give details about the progress of investigations into 11 cases. Between 1999 and 2008, the EU injected more than €2 billion into the post-war recovery and state-building operation led by the United Nations mission in Kosovo. Arlacchi says the lack of visible results led the establishment of an investigation task force by the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services, the Financial Investigation Unit, consisting of agents of the Italian Guardia di Finanza and of the EU's anti-fraud unit OLAF. This task force found out that the vague legal architecture set up in Kosovo by the EU and UNMIK resulted in a lack of accountability as to how donor money was spent. He also commented that the 11 cases relate to the privatisation of electricity services. Thought for the day. Britishness and what it actually means to you today. Well, Britishness. That is a much overused and underrated word nowadays. It is denied by the greater majority of the British people and coveted in a financial sense only by thousands of non-British people. Britishness started to die out after World War I, when the class system wobbled and Marxism reared its ugly head. All things English and educated were looked on as old-fashioned. It was old-fashioned to know your place, to try and educate yourself out of your designated strata in life instead of it being awarded to you. People strived for better in those days, although not a golden age. It heralded a new era of professions. Doctors and lawyers assumed a much higher role in society than previously, when they were thought of as bleeders and clerks. People who had been in service for generations decided to break the mould and work for themselves. It became an era when blood did not merit automatic reverence, but it did still rule the empire, and although there are many awful mistakes in those times, they still did a better job than now. Britishness ended for good in the 50s, in fact after World War II. It died out under the Allies, and the loss of a whole generation in the previous war that were the golden boys of England, combined with the huge losses we suffered of yet another generation of youth in 39–45. We English have always had trouble with the American way of life, and yet we embraced it to a ridiculous degree during those times. We adopted coffee bars and wimpies, but still had desegregation to go through with the advent of the first so-called wanted immigrants from the Indies problem when they landed on these shores. It was the start of the rot of English structure. But in the 50s England was a good place to live. It might have had its slums, but they were for the most part British slums. The reek of curry had not yet reached these shores. Church bells still rang. People played cricket on village greens. Ordinary people drank tea, not booze, all day. We did not watch TV from morn till night. We played in the open. I even went on a bus into the countryside with a friend when I was 12 and we came back home safe. We walked to school. My mother was home when I came home. Childcare was non-existent unless you class a nanny as such. Of course there was awful poverty still, but it wasn't centred around the slums, it was affecting the middle class. one-way divorce laws, and archaic attitudes towards women still existed despite the previous war. Our elders were respected, our teachers even more so. I was brought up to be frightened of what could happen if I strayed from the path of normality, not with a vision of what I deserved or my human rights. I was a child, then I was an adult. Teenagers had made an appearance but were generally ignored. England, I remember, was a pleasant place, a quiet place, a place where you saw people better dressed than you, and that is what you wanted to be, better. No, one does not deserve anything you haven't worked for, but I still hold on to the fact that if my ancestors had worked bloody hard or been in the right place at the right time, then I believe in inherent land and money. Why? Because these are the people who made this country great. Not the actors, the footballers, the comics, the so-called political worthies, and in some cases the downright degenerates. They have done nothing for Britishness or for the longevity of such. No, the England and the Britishness I and others of my subsequent generations knew is gone, dead and no more. You cannot revive it because only Jesus can raise the dead. So the establishment, who are usually anything but British, even old British, are trumping new ways of making us and newcomers feel British. Well, they're preaching to the damned in my case. I simply do not care if newcomers feel they are British or hate Britain, because there should not be any more newcomers to these shores. The dreaded Olympics, yet another branding of Britain to keep our minds away from what is really happening in this country, is nearly upon us. We have all sorts holding the sodding Olympic torch, from really gutsy people with no legs to ageing celebs. I thought the whole point for the Olympic torch was for a young naked guy to run all the way into the Greek stadium from an outlying village to signify the true physical ideal of the games. From what I have seen of this mass of all-inclusive and diverse humans, none come even near to that ideal of old, I'm afraid. Because if it had, my friends, this presenter would have watched every move. Now, this report following is truly worrying. The report Understanding Society from the Institute for Social and Economic Research at the University of Essex show that Muslims, in particular those whose family roots are in Pakistan, are the most likely of all groups to identify with the concept of Britishness. Ethnic minorities identify more closely with the idea of Britishness than their white counterparts, new research has revealed, contradicting the perception that immigrants do not integrate into British society. The study also revealed that identification with Britishness is found to be higher among the children and grandchildren of migrants, and that white, Chinese and Afro-Caribbeans associate least with the concept. Well, if this gives you a warm and fuzzy feeling, forget it. It relates apparently mainly to the Muslim Pakistani community. Ah, well then, we can ignore the little matter of Muslim sexual grooming of non-Muslim underage girls, can't we? If they view themselves as British or loving Britain, it is because in plain speak and crone speak they already think of Britain as theirs. It is as simple as that. In their minds they are not Pakistani Muslims, they are British Muslims, and this is their country, Britain. That is what the endorsement of that headline really means. That report of Muslims thinking of themselves as British is the most dangerous form of propaganda we have had yet to date. It must be watched, because our media, even if they have cottoned onto it, will never admit that is what this means. Thinking of oneself as being British and on an equal or superior footing with the indigenous white population is not integration, it is colonisation. Of course these parasites think of this as their country as opposed to the white population, because it is. We whites do not think of it as our country because our government does not want us to. This possessiveness is never plugged in our schools or universities. This country is here apparently for the benefit of the poor, hungry, illiterate and greedy of the world in general. Can you imagine what a furore would be caused if we whites started thinking and acting as if Britain was our country? Fascist, Nazi nationalists would be the outcry from the Marxist lovies, and worse from the websites of the ignorant. We have always known that the Chinese never, ever adopt the countries they migrate and earn money from. They are past masters at non-integration and non-delegation. The other group, the Afro-Caribbeans or West Indians, have rarely been at home anywhere, even in the West Indies. They are mainly of African stock, and blood will out, as my dear mother used to say. They may have settled here and are usually very good at interracial relations, which has resulted in a plethora of mixed-race generations, but British, never. So if this latest university bit of nonsense gives you any hope for peace in our time, do not bother. Even the press has issued a warning that soft-touch Britain is the asylum seeker capital of Europe. I would have put the world, of course, excepting that there are some countries that not even these cockroaches would migrate to. Why? Because they would be killed, not fed, tortured, not given expensive houses to breed in, or generally ignored and left to starve, not given benefits and free health service on demand. It also issued a stupid figure for our top status of asylum seekers granted permission to stay in 2011. That figure? 14,360. I'm not going to go into print on what I think of that one. Britishness, that is the question. Well, I have said Britishness is dead. Whites want to be either black or out of the country. That is the fashionable thing to be nowadays. Young, rich, multicoloured, liberal and ignorant. We need a monument to the Britishness of old and not a huge and hugely pregnant woman from Damien-Hirst. But the one thing I will say about it is that she does at least look non-ethnic. Well, I've only seen the publicised backside. Perhaps Hirst has gone all diverse and enriched on us Brits. And finally, it has been reported that farmer Linda Jeffries, 61 of Essex, has for years been embroiled in a needle match over a right-of-way running to one of her fields across the land of her neighbour, smallholder Pauline Robb, 54. This has culminated in a court case when they decide to sue one another. Jeffries, who rears rare breed sheep, is also a devoted owner of a Hungarian Commandor dog and a Bouvier de Flandre dog called Vampire. She's been accused by Robb of using her dog walking to spy on Robb and her husband. This has resulted in Jeffries being handed an injunction under the Protection from Harassment Act after a judge found that she had been using the path for snooping. The order stipulates that Mrs Jeffries must move along at a reasonable speed when using the disputed path or face a maximum penalty of £5,000 or 6 months imprisonment. A World at 8 reporter commented, "This means the poor lady will have to power walk or run with 2 very large dogs to avoid having to pay this whopping fine." Could only happen in England. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.